pyramid rises from the floor of a silent valley in central Mexico. It is not small, it is not modest. It is a mountain built by human hands. Nearly 2,000 years ago, someone gathered stone, earth, and volcanic rock and shaped them into a monument containing roughly 1 million cubic meters of material. Layer upon layer of stone, tens of thousands of tons carried, placed, and packed into form. The structure stands more than 65 meters high, its base stretching more than 200 meters across each side. Even by modern standards, it is enormous. Yet the most unsettling detail is not its size. It is the simple fact that no one knows exactly who built it. In the highlands northeast of modern Mexico City lies the vast archaeological zone known today as Teotihuacan. From above, the ruins appear like the skeletal outline of a lost metropolis. Massive pyramids anchor long avenues. Stone platforms stretch across the valley floor. Residential compounds once filled with thousands of people now lie silent beneath the Mexican sun. At its peak, this city was one of the largest on Earth. Between the 1st and 7th centuries of the Common Era, Teotihuacan grew into a vast urban center. Tens of thousands of people lived here. Some estimates suggest a population that may have approached 100,000 or more, making it comparable to the great cities of the ancient world. But unlike Rome, Alexandria, or Chang'an, Teotihuacan left behind almost no written history. There are no surviving chronicles describing its rulers, no deciphered texts explaining its purpose, no preserved name given by its own inhabitants. The word Teotihuacan is not ancient at all. It was given much later by another civilization. Centuries after the city had fallen into ruin, the Aztecs arrived in this valley and stood before the silent pyramids. They did not know who had built them either. The structures were already ancient, already mysterious, already abandoned. To the Aztecs, the place felt sacred, otherworldly. They called it Teotihuacan, a name drawn from the Nahuatl language. Its meaning carries a sense of awe. The place where gods were made, or perhaps the place where men become gods, sometimes translated simply as the city of the gods. Even for a powerful civilization like the Aztecs, these monuments seemed beyond ordinary human creation. The pyramids appeared so ancient, so deliberate, so vast, that they felt like the work of divine beings. And towering above them all stood the largest structure in the valley, the Pyramid of the Sun. It dominates the landscape with an almost overwhelming presence. Rising from the eastern side of the city's central avenue, the pyramid spreads outward in massive terraces, its broad stone slopes climbing steadily toward the sky. Seen from a distance, it resembles a natural mountain more than a building. But every stone was placed by human hands. At the base of the structure lies one of the longest ceremonial roads in the ancient Americas, a straight and imposing corridor that slices through the heart of the city. Today it is known as the Avenue of the Dead. The name is dramatic, almost ominous. Yet it too was given long after the city had vanished. The Aztecs believed the structures lining this avenue were tombs for ancient kings and heroes. In reality, archaeologists now believe they were ceremonial platforms and temples. The avenue stretches for more than 2.5 kilometers, connecting the great monuments of Teotihuacan in a grand architectural sequence. Along its path stand the city's most powerful symbols: pyramids, plazas, temples, and platforms arranged with careful intention. At its northern end stands another colossal structure, the Pyramid of the Moon, framed against the slopes of a nearby mountain. At its center rises the Pyramid of the Sun, positioned with deliberate precision along the axis of the city. Everything about Teotihuacan suggests planning. The streets follow a strict geometric pattern. Buildings align with invisible lines across the valley floor. Monuments appear positioned, not randomly, but according to a deliberate design. It is a city constructed with an awareness of space, direction, and cosmic order. And that is where the mystery deepens. Because the builders of Teotihuacan did not simply raise enormous monuments, they aligned them with the sky itself. The orientation of the city deviates slightly from true north, angled about 15 degrees eastward. This shift was not accidental. Across the city, buildings follow the same orientation, suggesting a single master plan guiding the entire urban landscape. Many archaeologists believe this orientation reflects astronomical observations, perhaps the movement of the sun across the horizon or the rising. In other words, the city may have been designed not just as a place to live, but as a reflection of the cosmos, a civilization aligning architecture with the heavens. Yet despite the astonishing scale of the city, despite the mathematical precision of its design, the identity of its creators remains unclear. Archaeologists have uncovered murals, pottery, obsidian tools, and sculptures. They have mapped the city's residential districts and traced its trade networks across Mesoamerica. They know the city flourished for centuries, but the people themselves remain strangely silent in the historical record. No kings have been definitively identified. No royal tombs clearly connected to a ruler have been found in the Great Pyramids. No inscriptions explain who commanded the construction of these immense monuments. The civilization that built Teotihuacan left behind architecture on a massive scale, yet almost no personal history. This contradiction has puzzled historians for generations. Who had the power to mobilize the labor required to build pyramids containing millions of stones? Who organized the construction of a city covering more than 20 square kilometers? Who designed the precise geometric grid that still shapes the ruins today? And perhaps most perplexing of all, why does such a powerful city leave so few clues about the people who created it? The silence surrounding Teotihuacan is almost as imposing as its pyramids. Standing in the valley today, the wind moves softly across the ancient stones. Visitors climb the massive staircase of the Pyramid of the Sun, pausing to look out across the ruins stretching toward the horizon. The Avenue of the Dead runs straight through the center of the city like an ancient spine, linking monuments that once formed the ceremonial heart of a thriving civilization. But the builders are gone, their voices are gone, their language is gone. Only the city remains. And with it, a question that has echoed through centuries of exploration and archaeology. If the Aztecs did not build Teotihuacan, who did? If this question fascinates you, consider subscribing to our channel and staying with us till the end. Long before the pyramids dominated the horizon, before the great avenue stretched across the valley floor, the land that would one day hold Teotihuacan was quiet and largely unremarkable. It was a broad basin surrounded by distant hills and volcanic ridges, a place where wind moved through grasses and seasonal rains carved shallow paths through the soil. Yet beneath that quiet landscape lay the ingredients that would eventually support one of the most remarkable urban experiments of the ancient world. Human presence in the valley of Teotihuacan reaches back well before the rise of the city itself. Archaeological evidence suggests that people were already living in this region centuries before the Common Era, establishing small settlements scattered across the valley floor. These early communities were modest in scale, built from simple materials and sustained by a mixture of farming, hunting, and trade with neighboring regions. What drew people to this valley was not chance. The geography offered several advantages that would quietly shape the destiny of the region. The soil itself was unusually fertile, enriched by layers of volcanic ash deposited over thousands of years by nearby eruptions. This mineral-rich earth proved ideal for early agriculture. Crops such as maize, beans, squash, and chili peppers could thrive here, providing a stable foundation for growing communities. Water, the most essential resource for any early civilization, was also present in abundance. Seasonal streams and underground aquifers fed the valley, allowing irrigation and supporting farming throughout much of the year. While not a lush tropical environment, the valley provided enough moisture to sustain crops and livestock if managed carefully. Yet perhaps the most valuable resource hidden within the landscape was something far less obvious: obsidian. Obsidian is a natural volcanic glass formed when lava cools rapidly. Dark, smooth, and razor-sharp when fractured, it was one of the most prized materials in the ancient Americas. Obsidian could be shaped into knives, spear points, arrowheads, and finely crafted ceremonial objects. In an age before metal tools were widespread in Mesoamerica, obsidian represented one of the most effective cutting materials available. The hills surrounding the Teotihuacan Valley contained some of the richest obsidian deposits in the region. For early communities, this meant access to a valuable trade commodity that could be exchanged across vast distances. Even in small quantities, obsidian artifacts traveled far beyond their place of origin. Archaeologists have found tools and weapons made from Teotihuacan obsidian hundreds of kilometers away, indicating that long-distance trade networks were already beginning to emerge long before the city itself reached its peak. Gradually, these early advantages began to shape settlement patterns. Villages that had once been scattered began to cluster closer together. Fields expanded outward from small communities. Trade routes grew more established, linking the valley with other cultures across Mesoamerica. The valley's position also played an important role. Located roughly 50 kilometers northeast of what is now Mexico City, the region sat near the crossroads of several natural corridors that connected central Mexico with distant territories. Traders moving between highland and lowland regions could pass through the valley, carrying goods, ideas, and technologies with them. By the 1st century before the Common Era, something began to shift. The small agricultural villages that once dotted the landscape were slowly transforming. Population began to grow at a steady pace. Archaeological surveys reveal evidence of new residential areas forming, along with larger public spaces that hint at emerging social organization. Between the 1st century BCE and the 1st century CE, the valley experienced a period of rapid development. New structures appeared that were larger and more complex than the simple homes of earlier generations. Construction techniques became more sophisticated. Communities began organizing themselves around shared ceremonial and economic spaces. The signs of coordinated planning began to emerge. Rather than expanding randomly, the growing settlement appeared to follow an increasingly deliberate pattern. Roads were laid out in straight lines. Buildings were arranged with careful orientation. Residential compounds began forming in organized clusters, suggesting that the people living here were beginning to think of their community not simply as a village, but as a city. By the beginning of the 1st century of the Common Era, the transformation was unmistakable. Teotihuacan was becoming an urban center. Population growth accelerated during this period. The number of inhabitants expanded from small farming communities into a dense population that required new forms of organization. Housing compounds were constructed to accommodate multiple families. Public plazas began appearing across the settlement, spaces likely used for ceremonies, markets, and gatherings. Craft production also intensified. Workshops dedicated to shaping obsidian tools became more common. Pottery production increased in scale and complexity. Artists and artisans began producing decorative objects that would eventually become characteristic of Teotihuacan culture. Trade networks expanded as well. Goods from distant regions began appearing in the archaeological record. Shells from coastal areas, exotic stones, and other imported materials indicate that Teotihuacan was already connected to a wider world beyond the valley. By around 100 CE, the settlement had grown far beyond its humble beginnings. What had once been scattered villages were now merging into a unified urban landscape. The pace of construction accelerated dramatically. New buildings rose across the valley floor. Platforms, temples, and residential districts appeared in carefully arranged patterns that suggested a central authority guiding the expansion. Within a few generations, the city's growth became extraordinary. By around 200 CE, Teotihuacan had emerged as one of the largest urban centers in the Western Hemisphere. Tens of thousands of people now lived within its boundaries. Its streets stretched across kilometers of organized space. Its influence began extending far beyond the valley itself.
merchants carried Teotihuacan goods across Mesoamerica. Cultural ideas traveled alongside trade routes. The city was no longer just a regional settlement. It had become a hub of economic, cultural, and political influence. From the outside, the transformation must have seemed astonishing. In little more than a century, a quiet valley of small farming communities had turned into a sprawling metropolis. Monumental architecture began rising above the rooftops of residential compounds. Massive construction projects reshaped the landscape. Organized labor, planning, and leadership drove the city forward. Archaeologists studying this period often pause at the same question: how did this transformation happen so quickly? Between 100 BCE and 200 CE, the valley experienced one of the most dramatic urban expansions in ancient American history. Small settlements evolved into a city that would eventually rival the greatest urban centers of its time. Something
powerful was unfolding here. Something coordinated, ambitious, and unprecedented in the region. Within a relatively short span of time, the foundations of one of the ancient world's most remarkable civilizations had been laid. And then, almost suddenly, the city began to grow faster than anyone might have imagined. Within a few generations, the quiet valley that had once supported scattered farming villages had transformed into something far more extraordinary. What began as clusters of agricultural settlements was becoming a vast urban organism, a city whose scale would rival some of the greatest population centers of the ancient world. By the 2nd and 3rd centuries of the Common Era, Teotihuacan had reached its peak. Archaeologists studying the city's layout and residential density estimate that somewhere between 100,000 and 200,000 people may have lived here at its height. Even conservative estimates place its population well above most cities in the Americas at the time. To understand the significance of those numbers, it helps to place them in context. During the early centuries of the Common Era, the global urban landscape was still relatively sparse. Only a handful of cities anywhere on Earth had populations approaching these levels. Rome in the Mediterranean world stood among the largest. In Asia, cities such as Chang'an were expanding into major population centers. In this company, Teotihuacan stood among them, one of the 6 largest cities on the planet. Its physical footprint reflected that status. The city spread across roughly 20 square kilometers of the valley floor, an immense urban expanse for the ancient world. From the central ceremonial zone, residential districts radiated outward in all directions, filling the landscape with an intricate network of streets, plazas, and housing complexes. Unlike many early cities that grew chaotically over time, Teotihuacan displayed a striking sense of order. The city was organized into large residential blocks, each containing what archaeologists call apartment compounds. These structures were not simple houses. They were carefully planned living complexes designed to accommodate extended families or multiple households within a shared architectural space. A typical apartment compound consisted of rooms arranged around a central courtyard. Thick stone walls separated individual living quarters, while open spaces in the center allowed light and air to circulate. Some compounds housed dozens of people, functioning almost like miniature communities within the larger city. Archaeologists have uncovered more than 2,000 of these compounds across Teotihuacan's urban landscape. Each one reveals evidence of daily life: grinding stones for preparing maize, hearths where food was cooked, tools used for craft production, and fragments of painted murals that once decorated the walls. The compounds varied in size and complexity, reflecting social differences among their inhabitants. Some were modest, built primarily for ordinary families. Others were larger and more elaborately decorated, suggesting they belonged to higher status residents or specialized craft groups. What makes these residential areas remarkable is not simply their number, but the planning that shaped them. Many of the compounds were constructed using standardized architectural designs. Their walls followed consistent alignments with the city's grid. Their internal layouts repeated familiar patterns across different neighborhoods. This kind of uniformity suggests that the expansion of Teotihuacan was not left to chance. There appears to have been a guiding vision behind the city's development, an organized approach to urban planning that controlled how space was used and how communities were arranged. Essential infrastructure also supported the city's enormous population. Beneath the streets and courtyards, archaeologists have discovered drainage systems that carried rainwater away from residential areas. These channels helped prevent flooding during seasonal storms, protecting buildings and maintaining sanitation within the densely populated city. Water management extended beyond simple drainage. The inhabitants of Teotihuacan built systems to capture and distribute water throughout the urban environment. Channels, reservoirs, and carefully designed slopes directed water where it was needed while preventing erosion or structural damage. For a city of this size, such planning was essential. Without organized water control, heavy rains could easily have turned the valley's streets into rivers of mud. Instead, the people of Teotihuacan engineered their landscape to handle these challenges. Construction materials used across the city were also remarkably consistent. Builders relied heavily on volcanic stone, which was abundant in the surrounding hills. These stones formed the structural skeleton of walls, platforms, and monumental buildings. Infill between the stone blocks often consisted of compacted earth or rubble, creating sturdy foundations capable of supporting multi-room complexes. Adobe bricks, blocks made from sun-dried mud mixed with organic fibers, were another common building material. These bricks provided insulation and were relatively easy to produce locally. Once the structures were complete, walls were often coated with lime plaster, creating smooth surfaces that could be painted with vibrant colors. The use of lime plaster required considerable effort. Limestone had to be heated at high temperatures to produce the fine powder used in plaster mixtures. This process consumed large quantities of wood, suggesting that the surrounding forests were heavily exploited to fuel construction activities. The resulting architecture, however, was striking. Many buildings were finished with polished plaster walls that reflected sunlight and served as canvases for murals depicting animals, deities, and symbolic imagery. These painted surfaces added a vivid artistic dimension to the city's urban landscape. As the city expanded, distinct neighborhoods began to emerge. Archaeological evidence shows that different groups specialized in particular crafts or occupations. Some districts were dominated by obsidian workshops, where artisans shaped volcanic glass into knives, blades, and ceremonial objects. Other neighborhoods produced pottery, textiles, or decorative sculptures. These specialized districts reveal an increasingly complex economy. Craft production was not limited to household use. Many of these goods were clearly intended for trade. The city's artisans created objects that circulated across Mesoamerica, linking Teotihuacan to distant regions. Even more intriguing is the presence of immigrant communities within the city. Excavations have uncovered architectural styles, pottery designs, and burial practices that differ from those typical of Teotihuacan itself. These clues suggest that people from other cultures had settled here, bringing their traditions with them. Some compounds contain artifacts associated with the Maya regions to the southeast. Others reflect influences from Oaxaca, a region known for the Zapotec civilization. Additional evidence points to connections with cultures along the Gulf Coast. These findings indicate that Teotihuacan was not just a city of local inhabitants. It was a cosmopolitan center where people from multiple cultural backgrounds lived and worked together. Traders, artisans, and migrants likely arrived seeking opportunity in a thriving urban economy. In many ways, the city functioned as a magnet. Its expanding population, active trade networks, and monumental construction projects created a dynamic environment that attracted people from across Mesoamerica. By the time Teotihuacan reached its height, the valley had become home to an urban population unlike anything the region had seen before. Streets were filled with merchants and laborers. Workshops hummed with activity as craftsmen shaped obsidian and clay into tools and art. Ceremonial spaces hosted rituals that bound the community together. From a distance, the city must have appeared almost overwhelming, a vast landscape of stone walls, courtyards, and towering monuments rising above the valley floor. Yet the most remarkable feature of this metropolis was not simply its size or population. It was the underlying order that governed the entire urban environment. Every street, every compound, every monumental structure appeared aligned according to a larger design. This was not merely a large city, it was a city arranged with mathematical precision. What are your thoughts about this city? Do share with us in the comments section. If one could rise high above the valley of Teotihuacan and look down upon the city at the height of its power, the first impression would not simply be of size, it would be of order. Across the valley floor, streets and structures did not wander randomly as they did in many ancient settlements. They followed a deliberate pattern, as though the city had been drawn across the landscape by a giant geometric hand. Buildings aligned with one another in disciplined rows. Plazas opened with symmetrical precision. Entire districts followed the same directional logic, repeating angles and orientations again and again across kilometers of space. Teotihuacan was not merely built, it was measured. At the heart of that measurement lay a strict geometric grid that governed the layout of nearly the entire urban landscape. Archaeological surveys have revealed that most of the city's buildings, streets, and residential compounds follow a consistent orientation, rotated approximately 15.5 degrees east of true north. This orientation was not accidental. It appears repeatedly across the city, shaping everything from monumental pyramids to humble apartment walls. Even small structures built by ordinary residents adhered to this alignment, suggesting that the orientation was enforced as a foundational rule of construction. To modern observers, this slight tilt might seem insignificant, yet when applied across an urban area covering 20 square kilometers, the effect becomes extraordinary. The entire city moves together in the same directional rhythm, as if guided by an invisible compass whose logic governed every stage of construction. At the center of this immense grid lies the most defining feature of Teotihuacan's urban design, a monumental corridor known today as the Avenue of the Dead. Stretching across the heart of the city, this broad ceremonial road runs for roughly 2.5 kilometers from north to south. In places it measures close to 40 meters wide enough to accommodate vast public gatherings, ceremonial processions, and the daily movement of thousands of inhabitants. Standing along its length today, one senses immediately that this was no ordinary street. It rises and falls across the valley floor through a sequence of terraces and plazas, bordered by platforms and monumental structures. Stairways climb toward elevated courtyards. Stone walls frame large ceremonial spaces. The road itself seems less like a path and more like a grand stage upon which the life of the city unfolded. The name Avenue of the Dead was given by the Aztecs many centuries after the city had already been abandoned. When they encountered the ruins, the long rows of platforms lining the avenue appeared to them like tombs, and they imagined the road as a passage lined with burial monuments. In reality, these structures were likely ceremonial platforms or foundations for temples and administrative buildings. They formed a processional landscape that guided movement through the ceremonial center of the city. As the avenue moves northward, it eventually reaches the Great Pyramid of the Moon, which rises at the foot of the Cerro Gordo mountain. The visual effect is striking. The pyramid appears to mirror the mountain behind it, creating a powerful alignment between human architecture and the natural world. This was not coincidence. The planners of Teotihuacan appear to have deliberately integrated the surrounding landscape into the city's design. Mountains, hills, and valleys were not simply environmental features. They were part of a larger symbolic framework that connected the city to the cosmos. Many ancient Mesoamerican cultures believed that mountains represented sacred places where gods, ancestors, and natural forces intersected. They were seen as sources of water, fertility, and spiritual power. By aligning major structures with prominent peaks in the surrounding landscape, the builders of Teotihuacan may have been embedding these sacred relationships directly into the city's architecture. From certain vantage points, the city's main avenues and pyramids align visually with distant mountains on the horizon. These alignments suggest that the planners were carefully considering sight lines across vast distances when determining where structures should stand. The city's geometric grid also helped organize its internal spaces. Ceremonial complexes were positioned along the main axis of the Avenue of the Dead, forming a sequence of monumental focal points that guided movement through the city's sacred landscape. Plazas opened outward from these major structures, creating gathering spaces for rituals, markets, and civic activities. Residential districts extended outward beyond the ceremonial core, arranged within the same grid system that governed the monuments. This integration of ceremonial and residential architecture reveals something important about how the inhabitants of Teotihuacan understood their world. The city was not divided into separate sacred and ordinary zones. Instead, daily life unfolded within the same spatial framework that supported religious and political rituals. Every street, every compound, every plaza participated in the same geometric order. To the people who lived here, the city itself may have represented something far greater than a collection of buildings. It may have been conceived as a symbolic model of the universe. In many Mesoamerican traditions, the cosmos was imagined as a carefully structured space divided into cardinal directions and layered realms. The heavens above, the earthly world, and the underworld. Beneath were connected through sacred centers where cosmic forces intersected. Cities often mirrored this cosmological structure. Temples represented mountains that linked the heavens and the underworld. Plazas served as gathering places where rituals maintained balance between cosmic forces. Roads and pathways symbolized the movement of gods, ancestors, and celestial bodies through the universe. Teotihuacan appears to embody these ideas on an enormous scale. The city's grid provided a cosmic framework, aligning the built environment with directional forces that may have carried spiritual meaning. The Avenue of the Dead formed the central axis around which ceremonial life revolved, connecting major monuments in a sequence that guided both physical movement and symbolic experience. The pyramids themselves acted as artificial mountains rising from the valley floor. Their stepped platforms and towering staircases may have represented pathways between earthly and celestial realms. Even the arrangement of residential districts could reflect cosmological ideas, placing communities within a spatial order that mirrored the structure of the universe. For those who lived here, walking through the city may have meant moving through a symbolic landscape where architecture, astronomy, and spirituality were inseparable. Every alignment, every orientation, every measured distance may have carried meaning far beyond simple practicality. Teotihuacan was not just an urban settlement. It was a carefully designed environment where geometry shaped not only the movement of people, but their understanding of the cosmos itself. And within that vast geometric vision, one structure stood as the most powerful expression of this cosmic design. Rising above the city's grid, dominating the horizon and the imagination alike, was a monument of staggering scale, the Pyramid of the Sun. Rising from the center of Teotihuacan's ceremonial district is a structure so immense that even today, standing at its base, the human mind struggles to grasp its scale. The Pyramid of the Sun dominates the valley with a quiet authority, its massive form anchored deep into the earth, while its terraces climb steadily toward the sky. It is the largest structure in Teotihuacan, and one of the most imposing monuments ever constructed in the ancient Americas. Its construction began around the 1st century of the Common Era, likely around 100 AD, during a period when the city itself was undergoing rapid expansion. At this moment in history, Teotihuacan was transforming from an emerging urban center into a powerful metropolis. Massive building projects reshaped the landscape, and among them the Pyramid of the Sun rose as the most ambitious. Today, the pyramid stands approximately 65 meters tall, which is about 213 feet from its base to its summit. While centuries of erosion and reconstruction have altered its appearance slightly, the structure still conveys the staggering ambition of its builders. Its base stretches roughly 220 meters along one side and about 230 meters along the other, forming an immense platform that occupies a vast section of the city's central zone. When archaeologists calculate the total volume of the pyramid, the numbers become even more striking. The monument contains close to 1 million cubic meters of material. That immense mass of stone and earth was assembled without metal tools, without draft animals, and without wheeled transport. To visualize this scale, imagine filling a cube 100 meters wide, 100 meters long, and 100 meters tall with solid material. The Pyramid of the Sun contains nearly that volume. It is not the tallest pyramid in the world, yet its enormous footprint makes it one of the largest by volume ever constructed. The structure itself is composed of several layers and materials that reflect both engineering practicality and the resources available in the surrounding region. The outer framework consists largely of volcanic stone known as Teotihuacan. This reddish porous rock forms when lava cools rapidly, trapping gas bubbles within its structure. The result is a material that is relatively lightweight compared to other stones, yet still strong enough to support large constructions. Teotihuacan was abundant in the volcanic landscape surrounding the Teotihuacan Valley. Workers could quarry it locally and transport it relatively short distances to construction sites. The stone's rough texture also helped plaster adhere to its surface, making it particularly suitable for buildings that would later be coated with decorative finishes. Behind the outer layers of stone lies the pyramid's core, a massive interior of rubble and compacted earth. Builders filled the interior with smaller stones, broken rock fragments and packed soil, creating a dense internal mass that provided structural stability. This technique allowed the builders to construct enormous monuments without requiring every portion to be built from precisely cut blocks. In some areas, adobe bricks were also used within the structure. Adobe, made from clay-rich soil mixed with water and organic fibers, could be shaped into blocks and dried in the sun. These bricks were lighter than stone and relatively easy to produce, making them useful for filling interior spaces within the pyramid's layered structure. Once the main body of the pyramid was assembled, the exterior surfaces were coated with lime plaster. This plaster was created by heating limestone at high temperatures until it produced a fine white powder. Mixed with water, the powder formed a smooth paste that could be spread across walls and surfaces. When applied to the pyramid's terraces, the plaster created a bright, polished finish that reflected sunlight across the valley. The structure would not have appeared as the weathered stone mass visitors see today. Instead, its surfaces were once smooth and luminous. Evidence suggests that the plaster coating was also painted with vivid pigments. Red, ochre, and possibly blue tones may have covered the pyramid's surfaces, transforming the monument into a striking visual centerpiece visible from great distances. Imagine standing in the valley nearly 2,000 years ago, approaching the city along a dusty road. Long before reaching the residential districts, the massive form of the Pyramid of the Sun would have appeared on the horizon. Its bright surfaces catching the light, its terraces rising step by step toward the sky, it must have seemed less like a building and more like a man-made mountain emerging from the earth. From the base of the pyramid, a monumental staircase climbs toward the summit. The staircase consists of roughly 260 steps rising in steep terraces that divide the pyramid into successive levels. Each level forms a broad platform where visitors could pause before continuing their ascent. Climbing those steps even today is a demanding physical experience. The height of each step is greater than what modern staircases typically use, forcing climbers to lift themselves upward with deliberate effort. For ancient participants in ceremonial processions, the ascent itself may have been part of a ritual journey. As one climbs higher, the perspective over the city expands dramatically. The Avenue of the Dead stretches across the valley floor below, framed by plazas and temples arranged within the city's precise geometric grid. The surrounding mountains form a distant ring around the basin, emphasizing the pyramid's position at the heart of a carefully structured landscape. At the summit once stood a temple structure that has long since disappeared. Archaeological evidence suggests that this temple may have been constructed from lighter materials that did not survive the centuries. It likely served as a sacred space where rituals, offerings, and ceremonies took place above the city. From that elevated platform, priests or ceremonial leaders would have been visible to thousands gathered in the plazas below. Smoke from burning incense may have drifted upward into the sky as chants and drums echoed across the valley. The pyramid was not simply a monument of stone. It was a stage for ritual activity that connected the people of Teotihuacan with forces they believed governed the universe. Yet even when one understands the materials and design of the structure, another question inevitably emerges. The sheer amount of labor required to construct a monument of this magnitude is staggering. Millions of stones had to be quarried, transported, lifted, and placed with coordinated precision. Workers had to shape terraces, build retaining walls, and maintain structural stability throughout the construction process. All of this occurred in a period when the city itself was still expanding, when other temples, plazas, and residential districts were also under development. Which leads to a question that continues to challenge archaeologists today. How did the builders of Teotihuacan manage to construct a pyramid of this size in such a remarkably short span of time? What do you think about this? To raise a structure the size of the Pyramid of the Sun required more than stone and soil. It required time, organization, and the coordinated effort of thousands of human lives working toward a single goal. Every layer of the pyramid carries silent evidence of labor. Hands that carried baskets of rubble, shoulders that lifted heavy stones, and minds that planned each stage of construction with careful discipline. Modern archaeologists have attempted to estimate the sheer amount of human effort required to create this monument. When the total volume of material is calculated, along with the logistics of quarrying, transporting, and assembling it, the result is staggering. The pyramid likely demanded somewhere around 6 million workdays of labor. If 6,000 workers were engaged in the project at any given time, the construction could theoretically have been completed in roughly a decade. That estimate assumes a constant, highly organized workforce operating continuously across the construction site. It suggests that the builders of Teotihuacan possessed the social structure and administrative control necessary to mobilize thousands of laborers simultaneously. The pyramid's construction appears to have taken place during what archaeologists call the Tzacuali phase of Teotihuacan's development, a period spanning roughly from 1 AD to around 150 AD. During this time, the city experienced an enormous burst of building activity. The great monuments of the ceremonial core began to take shape, including the Pyramid of the Sun itself. What makes the pyramid particularly unusual is the evidence suggesting that it was built largely in a single construction phase. Many ancient pyramids around the world were expanded over generations. Builders would create a smaller pyramid first, then enlarge it later by encasing it within additional layers of stone. At Teotihuacan, however, the Pyramid of the Sun appears to have been conceived as a massive structure from the beginning. Archaeological excavations indicate that the majority of its bulk was constructed in a single coordinated effort rather than through multiple expansions. This implies an ambitious vision from the outset, a plan that required enormous resources and confidence in the city's growing power. The basic construction technique followed a method common in large Mesoamerican monuments. Workers first created a series of stepped platforms using retaining walls made of volcanic stone. These walls formed the outer frame of each terrace. Behind them, laborers filled the interior with layers of rubble, smaller stones, and packed earth. This method allowed builders to create a stable mass without needing finely cut stone blocks for the entire structure. Large quantities of material could be gathered from nearby quarries or construction debris and compacted within the pyramid's interior. Over time, these layers formed a dense core capable of supporting the immense weight above. The stone blocks used in the pyramid's outer surfaces were bound together with a mud-based mortar. This mixture, made from clay-rich soil and water, acted as a natural adhesive between stones. When dried and compacted, the mortar provided sufficient strength to hold the structure together while still allowing some flexibility under pressure. Flexibility was important. Massive stone structures are vulnerable to cracking if they are too rigid. By using materials that allowed slight movement, the builders created a structure capable of absorbing small shifts in the ground or temperature without collapsing. Once the pyramid's main body was completed, the entire exterior was coated with limestone plaster. This plaster layer served both aesthetic and practical purposes. It created smooth surfaces that could be painted and decorated, transforming the pyramid into a visually striking monument. At the same time, it helped protect the underlying stone from erosion caused by wind and rain. Producing the plaster, however, required an enormous amount of effort. Limestone does not naturally form plaster simply by grinding it into powder. It must first be heated to extremely high temperatures, often exceeding 800 degrees Celsius, in order to break down its chemical structure. This heating process creates quicklime, which can then be mixed with water to form the plaster used in construction. Achieving such temperatures demanded large kilns fueled by burning wood. The process consumed vast quantities of timber. To coat the Pyramid of the Sun alone, thousands of tons of limestone would have needed to be processed in these fires. The result was an environmental impact that extended far beyond the construction site itself. Archaeological and environmental studies of the Teotihuacan Valley indicate that large-scale deforestation occurred during the city's peak construction period. Forests surrounding the valley were gradually cut down to supply wood for lime production, as well as fuel for pottery kilns and domestic fires used by the city's growing population. Over time, this loss of tree cover began to alter the landscape in profound ways. Without roots to hold the soil in place, erosion increased. Seasonal rains washed sediment into low-lying areas, reshaping the valley floor. Agricultural productivity may also have suffered as soil quality declined. What began as a practical solution for construction materials gradually became an ecological transformation of the entire region. In this sense, the Pyramid of the Sun was not just an architectural achievement. It was part of a massive environmental shift driven by human ambition. The resources required to build the city's monuments left lasting marks on the valley's ecosystems. And yet, despite the immense effort involved, the builders completed the structure with remarkable efficiency. The pyramid's terraces rise in balanced proportions, each layer reinforcing the stability of the whole. Even after nearly 2,000 years of weathering, much of the structure remains intact. Standing before it today, one can still sense the immense coordination required to create it. Thousands of workers must have moved through the construction site every day, quarrying stone, mixing mortar, carrying baskets of rubble up temporary ramps, and carefully placing each layer in its designated position. Leaders and planners likely oversaw the process from elevated platforms, directing the flow of labor and ensuring that the geometry of the pyramid remained true to its intended design. For a society without metal tools, wheeled vehicles, or draft animals, the accomplishment is extraordinary. The monument represents the combined physical effort of an entire community working in disciplined harmony. Yet the question of labor and technique leads naturally to a deeper mystery. Why undertake such an immense project in the first place? Building a structure of this magnitude required extraordinary resources, time, and social organization. It reshaped the environment and demanded the sustained commitment of thousands of workers. The reason for such effort may not have been purely architectural, because beneath the massive body of the pyramid lies evidence suggesting that its purpose may have been something far more complex than simply creating a monumental building. In Mesoamerican thought, mountains were not inert formations of rock. They were living places of power. They were believed to store water within their depths, to release rain through hidden channels, and to serve as dwelling places for divine forces. In a landscape where seasonal rainfall determined survival, mountains symbolized fertility, renewal, and the continuation of life itself. The Pyramid of the Sun rises from the valley floor with precisely this form. It is not smooth or rounded like a natural peak, but its stepped terraces create a visual resemblance to a constructed mountain. From a distance, especially when viewed across the basin, it blends into the surrounding landscape in a way that reinforces its mountain-like presence. The builders did not choose its location randomly. The pyramid stands within a carefully designed urban setting, surrounded by platforms, plazas, and ceremonial structures. Its position within the city's grid suggests deliberate placement at a central point of symbolic importance. The surrounding canals and drainage features may have further enhanced the association between water and sacred space, channeling rainwater through controlled systems that echoed the broader theme of water management across the city. In ancient Mesoamerican cosmology, mountains were often understood as reservoirs of life-giving resources. They were thought to hold water within their interiors, releasing it through springs and streams. Because rain was essential for agriculture, mountains became closely associated with deities who governed storms and fertility. Within this framework, constructing an artificial mountain in the center of a major city carried profound meaning. It was not simply an architectural statement, it was an act of cosmological imitation, shaping the landscape to reflect sacred beliefs about the structure of the universe. The pyramid's corners and foundation reveal additional evidence of ritual activity. Archaeologists have uncovered burials of children placed near the structure, particularly at key points around its base. These interments were not casual or accidental. They appear to have been deliberate offerings associated with the pyramid's construction or dedication. In many Mesoamerican traditions, child sacrifices were linked to rain rituals. The symbolism reflected the belief that youthful life energy could help nourish the earth and encourage the arrival of seasonal rains. Such practices are known from later cultures in the region, where offerings were made to deities connected with storms, water, and agricultural fertility. The presence of these burials near the Pyramid of the Sun suggests that the monument may have played a role in similar ceremonial traditions. Some scholars propose that the pyramid was associated with a rain deity, possibly a form of a god later known in other cultures as Tlaloc. While direct identification remains uncertain, the symbolic connections between water, fertility, and sacred mountains align with this interpretation. Others argue that the pyramid's orientation and scale point towards solar symbolism. The monument's alignment within the city's broader geometric system may reflect observations of the sun's movement across the horizon. Its placement at the heart of the Avenue of the Dead could indicate that it functioned as a central reference point for ceremonial events tied to the solar cycle. It is possible that both interpretations contain elements of truth. In many ancient traditions, celestial forces and natural elements were interconnected rather than separated into rigid categories. The sun's warmth, seasonal rainfall, agricultural growth, and cosmic order were all part of a unified worldview. The Pyramid of the Sun may have embodied this unity. As an artificial mountain, it stood as a physical bridge between earth and sky. Its terraces created ascending levels that drew the eye upward, symbolizing movement toward the heavens. Ritual participants climbing its staircase would have experienced a gradual transition from the ground level of daily life to an elevated space closer to the sky. The act of ascent itself may have carried meaning. Climbing toward the summit could represent a journey from the human world into sacred territory. At the top, where a temple once stood, ceremonies may have been conducted in open view of the surrounding city and distant mountains. From that vantage point, the valley would have stretched outward in every direction. The Avenue of the Dead would align below, forming a central axis that structured the entire urban landscape. The pyramid's presence at the intersection of this axis suggests it occupied a position of symbolic authority within the city's design. The integration of water management features around the pyramid further strengthens the association with fertility themes. Channels and drainage systems directed rainwater through controlled paths, preventing flooding while also reflecting the city's broader engagement with environmental forces. In a region where rainfall could determine agricultural success or failure, the management of water carried both practical and spiritual significance. The pyramid's construction during a period of rapid urban expansion also suggests that its symbolic function may have been tied to the city's growth. As Teotihuacan transformed into a major metropolis, the artificial mountain could have represented stability, unity, or divine sanction for the emerging urban order. In many cultures, monumental architecture serves as a statement of collective identity. By building a structure of such magnitude, the inhabitants of Teotihuacan may have been expressing shared beliefs about their relationship with the cosmos. The Pyramid of the Sun stands not as a solitary object, but as part of a larger ceremonial landscape. Its alignment with surrounding structures, its integration into the grid, and its association with ritual offerings all point toward a complex spiritual system embedded within the city's design. Yet interpretations remain open. Archaeologists continue to debate whether the monument was primarily dedicated to solar cycles, rain deities, ancestral worship, or a combination of these elements. The evidence does not provide a single definitive answer. What it does reveal is intention. The pyramid was not constructed merely for defense, administration, or habitation. Its scale, placement, and ceremonial features indicate that it held profound meaning within the cultural framework of Teotihuacan. It was a mountain made by humans, shaped to reflect sacred geography, aligned with cosmic principles, and integrated into the life of the city. And beneath this artificial mountain, buried within its layers of stone and earth, archaeologists would eventually uncover something unexpected, evidence that hints at a deeper story hidden below the surface. The true dedication of the Pyramid of the Sun remains one of the enduring questions surrounding Teotihuacan. Despite decades of excavation and study, no inscription has been discovered that clearly names the deity or deities for whom the monument was constructed. Unlike later Mesoamerican civilizations, Teotihuacan left behind very little written evidence that can be directly interpreted. As a result, archaeologists rely on architecture, artifacts, burial patterns, and iconography to reconstruct possible religious meanings. One of the most widely discussed interpretations connects the pyramid to solar symbolism. The structure's immense scale, central placement within the city, and alignment within the broader urban grid suggest that it may have played a role in rituals connected to the sun's movement. In later centuries, when the Mexica encountered the ruins, they associated the monument with solar power and gave it a name reflecting that interpretation. They referred to the structure as Tonatiuh-Itzcuil, which can be translated as sun lock. The term implies a place where the sun was symbolically contained, restrained, or anchored. Although this name was applied long after Teotihuacan had declined, it reflects how subsequent cultures perceived the monument's relationship to celestial forces. Solar worship was central to many Mesoamerican belief systems. The sun was understood as a life-giving force whose daily journey across the sky ensured continuity and order. Rituals honoring the sun often involved offerings, ceremonial gatherings, and symbolic acts meant to sustain cosmic balance. If the Pyramid of the Sun functioned within such a framework, it may have served as a focal point for ceremonies aligned with solar cycles, marking solstices, equinoxes, or other calendrical events. However, not all evidence points exclusively toward solar interpretation. Another strong line of scholarly thought associates the pyramid with a rain deity, often linked in later traditions to a god known as Tlaloc. While direct identification remains uncertain for Teotihuacan specifically, several archaeological findings support the possibility that water-related rituals were central to the monument's function. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence is the presence of child burials discovered near the corners and foundation areas of the pyramid. These interments appear to have been deliberate offerings rather than accidental deaths. In later Mesoamerican cultures, child sacrifices were sometimes associated with rain ceremonies, reflecting the belief that youthful life energy could help invoke rainfall and agricultural fertility. The placement of these burials near the pyramid suggests that rituals connected to water and fertility may have been performed during or after construction. The symbolic association between children, rain, and agricultural renewal strengthens the argument that the monument could have been dedicated, at least in part, to a rain deity. Additional architectural features support this interpretation. The city's broader water management systems, including canals and drainage channels surrounding major structures, demonstrate a sophisticated engagement with water as both a practical and symbolic resource. In a region dependent on seasonal rainfall, controlling and directing water flow was essential for urban survival. If the pyramid was linked to rain rituals, its identity as a constructed mountain would have carried profound significance. Mountains in Mesoamerican cosmology were believed to store water within their depths and release it during storms. By building an artificial mountain at the city's center, the inhabitants of Teotihuacan may have been creating a sacred site designed to attract, contain, or honor rainfall. The monument's massive volume and elevated terraces would have reinforced this symbolism. From a ritual perspective, ascending the pyramid could represent a journey toward the realm where celestial forces governed precipitation and agricultural abundance. Yet another dimension complicates the picture. Within Teotihuacan, archaeologists have uncovered artifacts associated with fire rituals, including statues representing Huehueteotl, the old god of fire. Huehueteotl is typically depicted as an elderly figure, often seated and associated with hearths and ceremonial flames. His presence within the city suggests that fire played a significant role in religious practice. Fire rituals were deeply integrated into Mesoamerican cosmology. Flames symbolized transformation, renewal, and the passage of time. Ceremonial fires were used in various contexts, including calendar celebrations and rites marking transitions between cycles. The discovery of fire-related iconography indicates that Teotihuacan's religious system likely included complex ceremonies involving controlled burning, possibly conducted in plazas or temple spaces. These rituals may have been tied to agricultural cycles, political events, or cosmic alignments. One of the most significant fire-related traditions in later Mesoamerican cultures was the new fire ceremony. This ritual, practiced by civilizations that succeeded Teotihuacan, marked the completion of a major calendrical cycle and symbolized the renewal of the world. During the ceremony, all existing fires were extinguished and a new sacred fire was ignited to ensure the continuation of time and cosmic order. While the new fire ceremony is historically documented in later cultures, some scholars suggest that its roots may extend back to earlier civilizations, possibly including Teotihuacan. The presence of fire deity imagery and large ceremonial spaces could indicate that similar cycle-based rituals were performed here. If fire ceremonies were conducted at the Pyramid of the Sun, the monument might have functioned as a focal point for calendrical renewal. The combination of solar symbolism, fire rituals, and large-scale urban planning could reflect a belief system in which the pyramid embodied both celestial power and temporal order. Importantly, these interpretations are not mutually exclusive. Ancient religious systems often integrated multiple symbolic layers. The sun, rain, fire, and fertility were interconnected aspects of a unified cosmological worldview. A single monument could simultaneously represent solar authority, agricultural renewal, and ceremonial transformation. The lack of definitive inscriptions means that Teotihuacan's religious identity remains partially concealed. Unlike later civilizations that left detailed codices and carved texts, the builders of this city communicated their beliefs primarily through architecture, imagery, and ritual practice. The Pyramid of the Sun stands at the center of this interpretive landscape. Its scale, location, associated burials, and artistic evidence all suggest that it was not merely a structural achievement, but a sacred focal point. Whether dedicated to the sun, a rain deity, fire rituals, or an integrated combination of these forces, the pyramid clearly functioned as a central element in the spiritual life of the city. And yet, beneath the layers of plaster, stone, and ritual meaning, another discovery would challenge assumptions about the pyramid's origins, revealing that its foundation may conceal something even older than the city itself. In the cosmology of ancient Mesoamerica, the Earth was not a static surface, but a living entity. Beneath its crust lay hidden realms, sources of water, ancestral spirits, and the origins of creation itself. Among the most powerful symbols in this worldview was the cave. Caves were not merely geological formations, they were understood as portals between worlds. The dark interior represented the threshold between life and death, between the visible surface and the unseen depths below. To enter a cave was to cross into a liminal space, one where ordinary boundaries dissolved. Many Mesoamerican traditions describe caves as the womb of the earth. From darkness emerged life. Seeds germinated in soil hidden from sunlight. Water flowed from underground springs. In symbolic terms, humanity itself was believed to have originated from within the Earth's interior. The cave thus became a place of birth, transformation, and emergence. Within ancient iconography, cave imagery appears repeatedly. Glyphs depict mountain forms with open mouths or stylized entrances, suggesting that sacred landscapes were imagined as hollow and animate. Some representations showed deities emerging from cave-like openings, reinforcing the idea that divine forces originated from beneath the surface. Teotihuacan, with its massive Pyramid of the Sun rising above the valley floor, fits naturally within this symbolic framework. But beneath the pyramid lies something even more compelling: evidence of a cave system integrated into the monument's foundation. Archaeological investigations conducted near the base of the pyramid have revealed a natural cave running beneath its central axis. This subterranean chamber appears to predate the construction of the pyramid itself. The presence of the cave suggests that the location was already considered significant before the monument was built. In Mesoamerican belief systems, caves often represented entrances to the underworld. The underworld was not necessarily a realm of punishment, but rather a complex spiritual domain connected to ancestors, fertility, and cyclical renewal. Movement between the surface world and the subterranean realm symbolized transformation and continuity. The discovery of a cave beneath the Pyramid of the Sun has led many researchers to propose that the structure may have been deliberately positioned to mark or sanctify this natural feature. Rather than building a monument and later discovering a cave, it is possible that the cave itself determined the pyramid's placement. If true, this would transform our understanding of the monument's purpose. Instead of being solely a solar structure or ceremonial platform, the pyramid could represent a deliberate architectural framing of a sacred geological feature. The cave's orientation aligns with the pyramid's central axis, reinforcing the idea of intentional integration. Ancient builders may have recognized the cave as a place of spiritual power and constructed the pyramid above it to amplify its significance. Within the broader symbolic system of Teotihuacan, caves, mountains, fire, and water were interconnected elements. Mountains represented sacred elevations, caves represented sacred depths. Together, they formed a vertical axis connecting sky, earth, and underworld. This vertical cosmology appears frequently in Mesoamerican thought. Deities associated with the earth were often depicted emerging from caves or residing within mountains. Ritual offerings placed inside caves were believed to communicate directly with these forces. At Teotihuacan, evidence suggests that offerings were indeed deposited in subterranean contexts. Archaeologists have uncovered ritual objects within cave spaces, including ceramics, figurines, and other ceremonial materials. These deposits imply that the cave beneath the pyramid was not merely a geological accident, but part of a sacred landscape actively engaged by the city's inhabitants. Some scholars associate cave symbolism with deities such as Teotihuacan, an earth-related figure sometimes depicted in later traditions as a mountain heart or jaguar spirit associated with caves and darkness. Others point to Teotihuacan, the fire god, whose presence within subterranean rituals may have symbolized transformation through controlled flame. Fire within caves represents a powerful paradox: illumination within darkness, energy emerging from hidden space. Cave rituals across Mesoamerica often involved offerings placed deep within underground chambers. These could include food, pottery, precious materials, or in some contexts, human sacrifices. The act of descending into the cave symbolized communication with ancestral forces or requests for fertility, rainfall, or protection. The cave beneath the Pyramid of the Sun strengthens the interpretation that the monument was not solely dedicated to celestial observation, but also to subterranean cosmology. Its position over the cave may have created a symbolic axis connecting sky above, earth at the surface, and underworld below. In this configuration, the pyramid functions as a mediator between realms. Its summit reaches toward the heavens, while its foundation anchors into the Earth's depths. The cave at its base provides the literal and symbolic link to the underworld. This vertical integration may reflect a worldview in which balance between cosmic layers was essential for stability. Ritual activity at the pyramid could have involved ceremonies acknowledging this three-tiered structure of reality. If the cave was considered sacred before the pyramid was constructed, then the monument may have been designed to enshrine and elevate that sacred point. The builders may have recognized the cave as a natural axis of power and transformed it into the foundation of their most important structure. This possibility reframes the pyramid entirely. Rather than asking only what deity it was dedicated to, we must consider whether it was built to sanctify a location already revered. In many ancient cultures, sacred geography preceded monumental architecture. Natural features such as springs, caves, mountains, and river confluences often attracted early ritual activity. Over time, these sites were formalized with temples and structures that preserved and amplified their significance. The cave beneath the Pyramid of the Sun may represent precisely such a case. If so, the monument becomes not simply a pyramid, but a constructed envelope around a pre-existing sacred space. The cave would form the spiritual core, while the pyramid serves as its visible expression. This interpretation does not exclude solar, rain, or fire symbolism. Instead, it adds another layer to the complex meaning of the site. The pyramid may embody sky, earth, and underworld simultaneously, uniting multiple cosmological principles within a single architectural form. As investigations continue, the cave remains a crucial element in understanding Teotihuacan's sacred geography. Its presence suggests that the city's founders were attentive not only to geometry and urban planning, but also to the hidden structures of the earth itself. And if the pyramid was constructed to mark this sacred underground chamber, then its meaning extends deeper than stone and ceremony. It becomes a monument rooted in the womb of the earth. Among the most striking discoveries within Teotihuacan's ceremonial district is the presence of fire-related ritual objects, suggesting that controlled flame played a central role in the city's religious life. Fire, in many ancient cultures, was not merely a practical tool, it was a sacred force, transformative, purifying, and intimately connected to time itself. One of the most important artifacts associated with this tradition is a statue representing Teotihuacan, often described as the old god of fire. This deity appears in later Mesoamerican iconography as an aged figure, frequently seated, with features emphasizing endurance and ancient wisdom. The representation found at Teotihuacan stands approximately 58 centimeters tall, making it the largest known sculpture of this deity discovered at the site. The scale of this statue is significant. It suggests that fire rituals were not peripheral practices but integral elements of the city's ceremonial system. A sculpture of this size would have required deliberate craftsmanship and likely occupied a prominent ritual space. Its presence implies that fire ceremonies were conducted within the urban core, possibly in plazas or temple complexes connected to major monuments. Archaeological evidence further supports the importance of fire rituals. Fragments of braziers, ceramic containers designed to hold burning material, have been uncovered in various locations throughout the city. These vessels were likely used to sustain ceremonial flames during religious observances. Their distribution suggests that fire-based rites were not limited to a single temple, but may have occurred across multiple districts. Fire ceremonies in Mesoamerican traditions were often associated with calendar cycles. Time was not viewed as linear, but cyclical, structured around repeating patterns of days, years, and longer cosmological intervals. The completion of significant cycles required ritual acknowledgement to ensure the continued stability of the universe. In later civilizations, particularly among the Mexica, fire rituals marked the end of major calendrical periods. These ceremonies symbolized renewal and cosmic rebirth. All existing fires would be extinguished, and a new sacred flame would be ignited to begin the next cycle of time. While the most detailed historical records of such practices come from post-Teotihuacan cultures, some scholars believe that their origins may extend back to earlier urban centers, possibly including Teotihuacan itself. If fire rituals were conducted here, they may have served as markers of temporal transitions. The city's monumental architecture, aligned with celestial directions, could have provided a spatial framework for ceremonies tied to astronomical observations. The movement of the sun, the tracking of seasonal changes, and the structured grid of the city all suggest an awareness of time as something to be measured and ritually managed. The presence of Teotihuacan imagery strengthens the argument that fire symbolized continuity across generations. As an old god, this deity embodies endurance and the persistence of cosmic order. Fire in this context represents both destruction and renewal, the capacity to consume offerings while simultaneously sustaining life through warmth and transformation. Within the Pyramid of the Sun, evidence indicates that a temple once existed atop the summit. Though the structure no longer survives, archaeological traces suggest that it was constructed using lighter materials than the stone body of the pyramid itself. The temple would have completed the monument, providing a sacred enclosure for rituals performed above the city. The summit temple may have housed ceremonial fires or served as a focal point for offerings related to calendrical cycles. From that elevated position, priests or ritual leaders could have overseen ceremonies visible across the valley. The combination of fire, elevation, and architectural prominence would have amplified the symbolic power of such events. Fire rituals often required careful preparation. Wood had to be gathered and transported. Braziers needed to be crafted. Participants would assemble in plazas or temple courtyards, where flames were ignited in controlled settings. The smoke rising from these ceremonies would have been visible across the city, reinforcing the connection between ritual action and communal experience. In a society as large as Teotihuacan, coordinated fire ceremonies could have functioned as unifying events. Thousands of residents living in apartment compounds and specialized districts may have participated in or observed these rites. The shared experience of extinguishing and relighting fire could symbolize collective renewal, reinforcing social cohesion within the urban environment. The relationship between fire and time is particularly significant. In many ancient belief systems, time itself was conceived as cyclical, governed by recurring cosmic forces. Ritual. Fire ceremonies may have been intended to ensure that these cycles continued without disruption. By performing structured acts at designated intervals, the community could symbolically support the stability of the universe. The integration of fire imagery, calendrical symbolism, and monumental architecture suggests a sophisticated religious system. Teotihuacan was not merely constructing buildings, it was embedding cosmology into stone. The grid of the city, the alignment of its avenues, and the placement of its pyramids all appear connected to broader celestial principles. Yet the Pyramid of the Sun, despite its prominence, was only one part of this larger cosmic landscape. Its central position within the city suggests importance, but archaeological evidence indicates that other monuments were also carefully aligned with astronomical and directional patterns. The ceremonial core of Teotihuacan appears to have been conceived as an integrated system rather than a collection of independent structures. Fire rituals may have been conducted in multiple locations across this system, reinforcing temporal order throughout the city. The presence of braziers and fire-related artifacts in residential compounds further implies that ritual flame was not confined to elite temples alone. The statue of Huehueteotl, the brazier fragments, and the evidence of summit architecture together form a consistent pattern. Fire was not an incidental element of Teotihuacan's culture. It was embedded within its religious expression and possibly intertwined with its understanding of time, renewal, and cosmic continuity. Still, even with fire rituals and calendrical symbolism in view, the Pyramid of the Sun does not stand alone in reflecting the heavens. Across the valley, another monumental structure rises in deliberate alignment with celestial and urban geometry. And that structure reveals that the city's cosmic design extended far beyond a single pyramid. Before we discuss the second pyramid, kindly share your thoughts about the first one in the comments section. At the northern terminus of the Avenue of the Dead rises the Pyramid of the Moon, a monument that anchors the entire urban composition of Teotihuacan. If the Pyramid of the Sun dominates the center of the city, the Pyramid of the Moon defines its far end, creating a monumental axis that stretches across more than 2.5 kilometers of ceremonial space. The pyramid stands at the base of the Cerro Gordo mountain, a natural formation that forms a dramatic backdrop to the northern horizon. This placement is not accidental. The structure appears deliberately positioned to mirror the mountain behind it, creating a visual and symbolic dialogue between architecture and landscape. From certain vantage points along the Avenue of the Dead, the pyramid and the mountain align in a way that blends human construction with natural geography. This alignment reinforces a recurring theme within Teotihuacan's design, the integration of built monuments with surrounding topography. Just as the Pyramid of the Sun may reflect sacred mountain symbolism or subterranean cave significance, the Pyramid of the Moon seems to participate in a broader system of landscape correspondence. In terms of physical dimensions, the Pyramid of the Moon is slightly smaller than its counterpart, but remains imposing by any standard. Its base measures approximately 150 meters from east to west and about 130 meters from north to south. Though not as massive in volume as the Pyramid of the Sun, its height reaches roughly 42 meters, giving it a commanding presence at the end of the city's central axis. The pyramid's stepped terraces rise in layered tiers, each level receding inward to form a structured ascent. Like other major monuments in the city, it would originally have been coated in plaster, likely painted in vibrant colors that have since faded. The smooth surface would have contrasted sharply with the rugged volcanic landscape surrounding the valley. Archaeological evidence suggests that the Pyramid of the Moon may be among the oldest monumental structures in Teotihuacan. While exact dating remains complex, construction appears to have begun early in the city's development. Unlike the Pyramid of the Sun, which seems to have been built in a single large effort, the Pyramid of the Moon was expanded through multiple construction phases over time. Excavations reveal that earlier versions of the pyramid were gradually encased within larger additions. Each phase increased the monument's size, demonstrating a pattern of continuous enhancement rather than one-time construction. This layered history provides valuable insight into how Teotihuacan evolved. It suggests that the ceremonial core developed progressively, with monuments adapting as the city itself expanded. The pyramid's repeated expansion may reflect changes in political structure, religious practice, or population growth. As the city became more powerful, its monuments grew correspondingly larger, reinforcing their symbolic significance. Positioned at the northern end of the Avenue of the Dead, the Pyramid of the Moon serves as a visual counterbalance to the Pyramid of the Sun. Together, the two structures frame the city's central axis, forming a monumental alignment that structures the entire urban grid. From the summit of the Pyramid of the Moon, one can look southward down the Avenue of the Dead toward the distant Pyramid of the Sun. This sightline emphasizes the intentional symmetry embedded within the city's layout. The two pyramids appear to communicate across space, anchoring the ceremonial corridor between them. The surrounding plazas at the base of the Pyramid of the Moon further enhance its importance. These spaces would have accommodated large gatherings, rituals, and public ceremonies. The combination of elevated monument and open plaza suggests that this location played a central role in civic and religious life. While the Pyramid of the Sun often attracts attention for its sheer volume and association with subterranean features, the Pyramid of the Moon carries its own significance. Its location against the mountain backdrop strengthens interpretations that link the monument to landscape symbolism. In Mesoamerican cosmology, mountains were sacred spaces associated with deities, water sources, and ancestral power. The visual pairing of the pyramid and Cerro Gordo may have represented a sacred relationship between human architecture and natural formation. By constructing a stepped monument aligned with the mountain's silhouette, the builders may have been expressing cosmological principles through urban design. Additionally, the Pyramid of the Moon anchors a series of smaller platforms and plazas along the northern stretch of the Avenue of the Dead. These structures form a sequence that integrates ritual space with movement through the city. The alignment of these elements demonstrates the precision of Teotihuacan's planning. Unlike the more centrally located Pyramid of the Sun, the Pyramid of the Moon occupies a liminal position at the edge of the city's ceremonial axis. This placement may have symbolized transition or boundary. In many ancient traditions, cardinal directions held symbolic meaning, and the north often represented particular cosmological associations. The pyramid's layered construction also reflects the city's long-term development. Each expansion phase indicates sustained investment in maintaining and enhancing the monument. Rather than replacing older structures, builders incorporated them into new, larger designs. This continuity suggests reverence for the site's original significance. Excavations within and around the Pyramid of the Moon have revealed burials and ritual offerings, reinforcing its importance within Teotihuacan's religious system. These discoveries indicate that ceremonies conducted here were not limited to architecture alone, but included human participation and symbolic deposits. When considered alongside the Pyramid of the Sun, the Pyramid of the Moon completes the ceremonial framework of the city. The two monuments define the extremes of the Avenue of the Dead, creating a structured pathway that organizes urban movement and ritual procession. Together, they form a monumental dialogue, one centered in the heart of the city, the other positioned at its northern horizon. Yet it is precisely within the excavations of the Pyramid of the Moon that archaeologists encountered findings that altered the perception of Teotihuacan's ceremonial landscape in unexpected ways. What lay beneath its terraces revealed evidence that challenged assumptions about the city's rituals, leadership, and perhaps even its social structure. And those discoveries pointed towards something far darker than architecture alone. Excavations carried out between 1998 and 2004 at the Pyramid of the Moon significantly expanded understanding of ritual activity within Teotihuacan's ceremonial core. The project was led by archaeologists Rubén Cabrera and Saburo Sugiyama, whose systematic investigations revealed a complex pattern of dedicatory offerings associated with successive construction phases of the monument. These excavations uncovered 5 distinct sacrificial burials placed within architectural contexts linked to pyramid expansion. The burials were not random interments, but carefully positioned deposits integrated into construction layers. Their placement indicates that ritual sacrifice was embedded in. The building process itself likely intended to consecrate new structural additions and reinforce the monument's sacred status. Analysis of the human remains suggests a diverse group of individuals. Some were identified as foreign warriors, based on associated artifacts and burial context. Their presence implies that Teotihuacan engaged in interactions, possibly military or political, with distant regions of Mesoamerica. The inclusion of outsiders in ritual deposits may reflect conquest, alliance, tribute, or ceremonial exchange. Other individuals appear to have held high status, possibly dignitaries, inferred from the quality of accompanying objects and burial arrangement. In addition, evidence indicates that some victims were bound at the time of interment. The positioning of skeletal remains suggests restraint, and certain burial configurations support interpretations that some individuals may have been buried alive as part of ritual dedication. Such practices, while difficult to reconstruct in detail, align with broader Mesoamerican traditions in which human sacrifice functioned as an offering to sustain cosmic order, legitimize authority, or consecrate sacred space. The burials were not limited to humans. Animal remains formed a significant component of the ritual deposits. Species identified include wolves, eagles, pumas, hawks, and rattlesnakes. These animals carried strong symbolic associations in Mesoamerican cosmology. Predatory mammals and birds often represented power, martial strength, celestial forces, or divine attributes. The rattlesnake, in particular, held widespread symbolic meaning related to earth, water, fertility, and transformation. The inclusion of both terrestrial and avian predators suggests intentional selection rather than random sacrifice. These animals likely represented specific ideological or cosmological concepts. Their placement alongside human offerings reinforces the interpretation that the burials were part of structured ritual programs associated with monumental construction. In addition to biological remains, archaeologists recovered material offerings placed within the burial contexts. Obsidian weapons were among the most notable artifacts. Obsidian, a volcanic glass abundant in central Mexico, was a highly valued material in Teotihuacan. Its sharp edges made it ideal for cutting tools and ceremonial blades. The presence of obsidian weapons in sacrificial deposits indicates that martial symbolism was intertwined with ritual dedication. Jade figurines were also discovered. Jade, though not locally abundant, was highly prized throughout Mesoamerica for its durability and green coloration, which symbolized fertility, life, and water. The inclusion of jade objects suggests long-distance trade networks, as well as the capacity to acquire and dedicate rare materials for ceremonial purposes. Such offerings demonstrate the economic reach and organizational capacity of the city's elite institutions. The combination of human sacrifice, animal offerings, and prestige goods within the Pyramid of the Moon highlights the monument's role as a focal point for state-sponsored ritual activity. The integration of these elements into construction phases indicates that sacrifice may have accompanied each major architectural expansion. Rather than being isolated events, these ceremonies appear systematically linked to urban development. The discovery of multiple sacrificial contexts within a single pyramid also provides insight into the social and political structure of Teotihuacan. The presence of foreign individuals suggests interaction beyond the city's immediate population. Whether these individuals were captives, allied representatives, or participants in ritual exchange remains subject to scholarly interpretation. However, their inclusion in dedicatory deposits implies that ritual sacrifice functioned within broader geopolitical frameworks. The scale and organization of these burials demonstrate deliberate planning. The victims and offerings were placed in structured arrangements consistent with ceremonial intent. This pattern supports the view that Teotihuacan's leadership maintained centralized control over religious practices tied to monumental construction. These findings also contribute to understanding how ideology and architecture intersected. The Pyramid of the Moon was not simply a static structure, but a dynamic monument whose physical growth was accompanied by ritual actions. Each construction phase appears to have been marked by offerings designed to sanctify the expansion and reinforce cosmological alignment. The presence of powerful animal symbols, combined with human sacrifice, suggests a complex ritual system in which earthly and supernatural realms were conceptually linked. Predatory animals may have represented divine forces or warrior identities, while obsidian weapons symbolized controlled violence and technological mastery. Jade objects likely embodied life force and sacred value. Taken together, the evidence indicates that sacrifice was integrated into the city's ceremonial infrastructure. These discoveries at the Pyramid of the Moon provide tangible archaeological data that complement architectural analysis and urban planning studies. Yet even with these revelations, the sacrificial burials represent only one dimension of Teotihuacan's complexity. The city's monuments, rituals, and material culture operate within a larger framework of astronomical orientation and symbolic geometry. The architectural alignment of pyramids, plazas, and avenues suggests that Teotihuacan was designed not merely for habitation, but as a spatial representation of cosmological principles. Its layout encodes directional precision, celestial reference points, and integrated monumentality across the entire urban core. In this broader context, the sacrificial deposits may have served to activate or maintain the city's cosmic order. Ritual action, monumental architecture, and urban design appear interconnected within a unified system, which leads to a wider perspective on the city itself. Beyond individual structures, beyond sacrifice and ceremony, Teotihuacan presents an overarching design that binds its components together. And it is this comprehensive cosmic organization, extending across kilometers of grid, axis, and alignment, that may ultimately define the city's most remarkable achievement. Astronomical alignment is one of the most studied dimensions of Teotihuacan's urban design. The city's monuments do not appear randomly positioned. Instead, their orientation suggests sustained observation of celestial cycles and deliberate incorporation of those cycles into architectural planning. The Pyramid of the Sun is often discussed in relation to solar movement across the horizon. From specific vantage points in the surrounding valley, the monument interacts visually with the path of the sun throughout the year. Researchers have proposed that certain sightlines may correspond to significant solar events, including seasonal turning points, such as the summer solstice sunset. While interpretations vary, the consistent theme is that the pyramid's placement integrates solar geometry into the urban landscape. The pyramid's summit likely functioned as a high observation platform. From that elevation, the horizon becomes a measurable arc, allowing precise tracking of sunrise and sunset positions over time. Such observations would have been essential for calibrating agricultural cycles, ceremonial calendars, and ritual festivals tied to seasonal transitions. In this sense, the structure could have operated as both a religious monument and an astronomical instrument embedded in stone. Beyond the sun, Teotihuacan has also been associated with stellar references, particularly the Pleiades star cluster. The Pleiades held significant importance across many Mesoamerican societies and were integrated into calendrical systems. Their heliacal rising, the moment when the cluster becomes visible in the dawn sky after a period of solar conjunction, served as a temporal marker in several indigenous traditions. Some scholars propose that architectural alignments within Teotihuacan may reflect observational interest in this cluster. The orientation of the city's main grid is another critical component of its astronomical character. Rather than aligning strictly with cardinal north, the urban layout is rotated approximately 15.5 degrees east of true north. This deviation suggests that the builders selected a specific celestial reference point, rather than relying solely on geometric cardinality. The consistent orientation across major structures indicates a unified planning strategy rather than incremental development without coordination. This alignment extends across the entire city, including the Avenue of the Dead and associated plazas. The repetition of this directional axis implies intentional standardization. Buildings constructed in different phases maintain the same orientation, reinforcing the idea that astronomical principles guided urban expansion over time. Some researchers have proposed that the city's orientation corresponds to horizon-based astronomical events, possibly linked to solar positions on particular dates in the ritual calendar. Horizon astronomy was a common practice in ancient Mesoamerica, where natural landmarks such as mountains served as reference points for tracking celestial movement. Teotihuacan's surrounding valley, bordered by prominent peaks, would have provided clear, observational markers for such alignments. The interplay between architecture and horizon suggests that the city was designed as a large-scale observational system. Monuments may have functioned as sighting points, with sightlines connecting pyramids to mountains and celestial positions. This integration transforms the urban grid into a spatial calendar, encoding time within geography. The summit of the Pyramid of the Sun, in particular, would have offered an unobstructed view of both horizon and sky. Ritual specialists stationed there could observe solar trajectories, track seasonal changes, and coordinate ceremonies accordingly. The monument's height and central location amplify its potential role as a solar reference structure. Teotihuacan's astronomical design does not appear isolated to a single building. Instead, celestial considerations seem embedded throughout the city's layout. The integration of geometry and sky observation reflects a worldview in which cosmology and urbanism were inseparable. Architecture was not merely functional, it represented celestial order on Earth. The alignment of monuments may also relate to broader Mesoamerican cosmological concepts, which often emphasize cyclical time and directional symbolism. The sun's daily journey, the seasonal progression of light and darkness, and the structured calendar systems all provided frameworks for understanding existence. By embedding these cycles into urban design, Teotihuacan materialized abstract cosmological principles into physical space. The Pleiades connection, if intentional, would further reinforce the city's integration with the night sky. Star clusters, unlike individual stars, offer stable reference patterns. Their visibility across seasons made them useful for tracking longer temporal intervals. If architectural sightlines correspond to stellar positions, this would demonstrate advanced observational knowledge combined with monumental engineering. Importantly, astronomical alignment at Teotihuacan does not rely on a single interpretation. Multiple hypotheses coexist, reflecting ongoing scholarly debate. Some alignments may correspond to solar events, others to stellar phenomena, and still others to horizon landmarks. The complexity of the design suggests that celestial observation was systematic rather than incidental. This integration of astronomy and architecture indicates institutional continuity. The consistent orientation of buildings constructed over centuries implies that successive generations adhered to shared design principles. Such continuity requires educational transmission, administrative coordination, and cultural consensus regarding the importance of celestial order. The result is a city whose geometry encodes time, direction, and cosmic relationships. The urban grid functions as a large-scale diagram of celestial movement. Streets align with astronomical axes, pyramids mark horizon events, and plazas provide ceremonial space aligned with directional symbolism. Teotihuacan therefore represents more than an aggregation of structures. It embodies a coherent spatial philosophy grounded in observation of the heavens. The alignment of stone with sun and stars transforms the city into a terrestrial reflection of cosmic order. This architectural cosmology extended influence beyond its immediate boundaries. The principles embedded within Teotihuacan's design would later appear in other Mesoamerican cultures, indicating that the city's ideas, whether transmitted through trade, migration, or ideological exchange, had lasting regional impact. In this sense, Teotihuacan's astronomical framework was not confined to its valley. Its geometric and celestial concepts became part of a broader cultural landscape, influencing urban layouts, ceremonial architecture, and calendrical systems across generations. The city's integration of solar and stellar references demonstrates that its builders possessed detailed knowledge of celestial cycles and incorporated that knowledge into monumental form. The result is an urban environment where movement through space mirrors movement through time. Yet even with its astronomical precision, Teotihuacan's significance cannot be measured solely in alignments or monuments. Its deeper legacy lies in the way its design principles shaped the worldview of an entire region. Because what began as a city of stone and sky did not remain isolated. It became a model, replicated, adapted, and remembered across civilizations that followed. Between approximately 200 and 550 AD, Teotihuacan reached the height of its political, economic, and cultural power. During this period, its influence extended far beyond the basin of Mexico, shaping architectural forms, artistic conventions, trade systems, and religious imagery across vast regions of Mesoamerica. Evidence of Teotihuacan presence appears in multiple distant territories. In Maya regions, particularly within the southern lowlands, archaeological contexts reveal artifacts, architectural features, and iconographic elements that reflect Teotihuacan interaction. Some sites contain structures built in styles associated with Central Mexican design principles, including talud tablero architectural elements, a distinctive sloped and panel wall system characteristic of Teotihuacan construction. These features demonstrate either direct influence, migration, diplomatic contact, or political intervention. In Oaxaca, material culture shows parallels in ceramic styles and symbolic motifs. While local traditions remained distinct, the diffusion of Teotihuacan elements indicates sustained interaction across regional boundaries. The presence of shared artistic themes suggests that ideas, not just goods, traveled along established routes. Along the Gulf Coast, archaeological discoveries further confirm the city's expansive reach. The Gulf region functioned as a critical corridor connecting highland Mexico with lowland areas and maritime networks. Through these channels, Teotihuacan-style objects circulated widely. The distribution of such materials reflects complex trade systems rather than isolated exchanges. Obsidian was central to Teotihuacan's economic dominance. The city controlled access to major obsidian sources in central Mexico, including large deposits that produced high-quality volcanic glass. Obsidian was indispensable for cutting tools, weapons, and ritual implements. Because it could be shaped into sharp blades, it held both practical and symbolic importance. Teotihuacan's role in obsidian production and distribution positioned it as a key economic hub. Trade networks extended in multiple directions, transporting obsidian artifacts across long distances. These networks integrated distant communities into a shared material economy, reinforcing Teotihuacan's regional influence. Artistic styles associated with the city also spread widely. Iconography featuring standardized motifs, including depictions of deities, feathered imagery, and geometric patterns, appears in regions influenced by Teotihuacan contact. These symbols were not mere decorative elements, they carried ideological meaning. Their diffusion suggests that religious concepts accompanied material trade. Religious influence is particularly evident in architectural and ceremonial adaptations. In some regions, structures reflect Teotihuacan design principles, indicating that local elites adopted elements of the city's cosmological framework. The integration of foreign architectural styles into regional contexts implies prestige associated with Teotihuacan identity. The period of greatest expansion coincides with sustained urban prosperity. Between 200 and 550 AD, Teotihuacan maintained a dense population, extensive infrastructure, and complex administrative systems. Apartment compounds housed thousands of residents organized into neighborhood districts. These districts likely functioned as semi-autonomous communities within a broader urban structure. The city's economic foundation depended on agriculture, trade, craft production, and centralized coordination. Fertile valley soils supported large-scale food production, while obsidian trade provided external revenue streams. Craft specialists produced ceramics, obsidian tools, textiles, and ritual objects for both local use and export. Teotihuacan's urban layout facilitated this economic integration. The grid system, standardized building techniques, and major ceremonial axis allowed efficient movement and structured development. This organization likely supported administrative oversight and resource distribution across the metropolis. The influence of Teotihuacan extended beyond physical goods. Ideological models of governance, ritual authority, and cosmological order appear in distant regions where Teotihuacan contact is documented. The city's combination of monumental architecture, celestial alignment, and ritual systems may have served as a template for regional elites seeking to enhance legitimacy. Such widespread impact suggests that Teotihuacan was not merely a local power, but a central node in a broader Mesoamerican network. Its artistic, economic, and architectural influence indicates sustained engagement rather than brief interaction. Throughout its peak centuries, the city functioned as a dynamic hub of exchange. Goods moved outward, ideas traveled with them, architectural forms were replicated, symbolic systems were adapted. Regional cultures incorporated elements of Teotihuacan identity into their own traditions. This era of influence demonstrates that Teotihuacan's power was multifaceted. It combined economic control, cultural prestige, religious authority, and urban scale. Few ancient cities in the Americas achieved comparable regional reach during this period. And yet, despite this extraordinary expansion and sustained prosperity, the historical trajectory of Teotihuacan does not continue indefinitely. Archaeological evidence indicates that by the mid-6th century, major transformations occurred within the city. Monumental buildings show signs of destruction. Elite compounds reveal evidence of burning. Artistic production declines, population patterns shift. Around the latter half of the 6th century, the city's dominance begins to unravel. The reasons for this collapse remain debated, and the evidence suggests complexity rather than a single cause. And then, the city that once shaped an entire civilization entered a period of abrupt decline, leaving behind monuments, ruins, and unanswered questions etched into stone. Around the period between 550 and 600 AD, Teotihuacan entered a phase of structural crisis. Archaeological evidence from the ceremonial core indicates widespread burning in key administrative and elite compounds. These fires were not isolated events. They appear concentrated in areas associated with governance and high-status residents. The pattern suggests organized destruction rather than accidental conflagration. Some scholars interpret this evidence as signs of internal revolt. The targeting of elite architecture, while leaving much of the broader urban grid intact, implies possible social upheaval within the city itself. If power was concentrated among ruling institutions, then resistance could have manifested through coordinated attacks on administrative centers. The burn layers discovered in excavation contexts support the conclusion that significant disruption occurred during this transitional period. At the same time, external factors may have compounded internal instability. Teotihuacan's regional influence depended heavily on trade networks, particularly those involving obsidian distribution and long-distance exchange. When these networks weakened or fragmented, the city's economic foundation would have been affected. Reduced trade could have diminished resource flow, elite authority, and interregional alliances. Environmental stress is another factor considered in discussions of decline. The city's large-scale lime plaster production required extensive wood consumption, and evidence indicates significant deforestation in the surrounding valley. Over time, ecological pressure could have altered local agricultural productivity and resource availability. Changes in rainfall patterns, soil conditions, or watershed dynamics may have further influenced sustainability. Population estimates suggest that Teotihuacan supported between 100,000 and 200,000 inhabitants at its height. Maintaining such density required coordinated infrastructure, food production, and administrative systems. If political cohesion weakened, even partially, sustaining urban services would have become increasingly difficult. By the mid-6th century, monumental construction slows. Artistic output shifts. Some residential areas show signs of reorganization. These patterns indicate transformation rather than immediate abandonment. The city did not vanish overnight. Instead, it underwent a prolonged period of decline and restructuring. Trade relationships that once connected Teotihuacan to Maya regions, Oaxaca, and the Gulf Coast appear diminished in later contexts. The diffusion of Teotihuacan-style architecture and iconography declines correspondingly. As external influence receded, regional systems may have reoriented toward new centers of power. By approximately 750 AD, archaeological evidence suggests that much of the urban core was largely uninhabited. Some peripheral occupation may have continued, but the grand ceremonial axis no longer functioned as the heart of a thriving metropolis. The pyramids remained standing, yet the dense population that once animated the city had dispersed. The causes of abandonment likely involved a combination of internal political disruption, economic contraction, environmental pressures, and shifting regional dynamics. Rather than a single catastrophic event, the evidence points toward interconnected processes that gradually undermined urban stability. Centuries later, when the Mexica, commonly known as the Aztecs, encountered the ruins, they found monumental architecture already ancient and partially eroded. They did not inherit the city directly. Instead, they discovered it in a state of abandonment. Impressed by its scale and geometry, they named it Teotihuacan, a term reflecting their interpretation of its sacred character. For the Aztecs, the site represented a place associated with divine origins and cosmic transformation. They integrated the ruins into their own mythological framework, recognizing the pyramids as structures built by predecessors whose identity had already faded into legend. The original builders left no surviving written record that can definitively explain their language, governance system, or self-identification. While inscriptions and symbolic imagery exist within the archaeological record, no comprehensive textual archive comparable to later civilizations has been recovered that clarifies their historical narrative. As a result, much about their internal political structure remains inferred rather than directly documented, yet the physical evidence remains extraordinary. The city covers approximately 20 square kilometers, organized according to a consistent grid. Its principal avenue extends more than 2.5 kilometers. Major pyramids contain volumes measured in hundreds of thousands to over 1 million cubic meters of material. Construction required immense labor coordination, standardized planning, and sustained resource management. Teotihuacan's architecture demonstrates advanced understanding of structural stability, urban planning, and spatial organization. Apartment compounds indicate multi-family residential design. Drainage systems show hydraulic engineering capacity. Standardized orientations reflect centralized planning principles maintained over centuries. Despite decline, the monuments endure. The Pyramid of the Sun, the Pyramid of the Moon, and associated platforms remain visible across the valley. Even after centuries of erosion, their geometric form persists. The alignment of the Avenue of the Dead continues to define the site's spatial logic. The city's enduring presence contrasts sharply with the disappearance of its political system. Buildings remain, but institutions dissolved. Stone endures, but social identity transformed. This divergence between material permanence and cultural continuity contributes to the site's lasting mystery. Teotihuacan demonstrates that civilizations can achieve monumental scale and regional influence without leaving behind detailed historical chronicles. Archaeology reconstructs its narrative through stratigraphy, artifact distribution, architectural sequencing, and environmental analysis. Each excavation adds data, yet complete reconstruction remains elusive. The final centuries of Teotihuacan reveal a pattern seen in other ancient urban centers. Concentrated power structures, ecological strain, trade reconfiguration, and possible internal conflict can collectively alter trajectories. Urban systems are complex networks. When multiple stresses converge, transformation can accelerate. By the time the Mexica arrived centuries later, the pyramids stood as silent witnesses. The city's original population had dispersed or integrated into other regional groups. Cultural memory persisted in mythic form, but direct institutional continuity was absent. The builders vanished as a political entity. Their administrative framework dissolved. Their language did not survive in documented form that can be confidently reconstructed as their primary spoken tongue. Their self-designation remains unknown, yet the physical city remains intact in its foundational geometry. 1,000,000 stones aligned with deliberate orientation still mark the landscape. The grid persists, the axes remain measurable, the pyramids still define horizon lines. What kind of civilization constructs an urban system that encodes cosmology, aligns with celestial cycles, organizes trade networks across vast distances, integrates ritual sacrifice into architecture, and sustains regional influence for centuries, and then transitions into historical obscurity? Teotihuacan demonstrates that complexity does not guarantee permanence. Monumental achievement can outlast the institutions that created it. Cities can become landscapes of memory, reshaped by later cultures, but retaining their original structural intent. The question is not merely about disappearance, it is about transformation. Civilizations evolve, fragment, adapt, and reconstitute in new forms. Teotihuacan's decline did not erase its influence. Architectural, artistic, and ideological elements continued to resonate across Mesoamerica long after its political peak. In the end, the city stands as evidence of coordinated human capability on a vast scale. Its alignment with the cosmos, its urban precision, its economic networks, and its ritual complexity together form one of the most remarkable achievements in pre-Columbian history. The stones remain, the language changed, the rulers are unknown. But the geometry endures, a testament to a civilization that built not only for survival, but for cosmic order. And that legacy continues to invite investigation, interpretation, and reflection. Thank you for joining us on this extraordinary journey through the universe on Frontiers of Infinity. If this glimpse into the unknown has sparked your curiosity, be sure to subscribe and join us, where we unravel the darkest mysteries of space.